back to Chessometrics. Today I would like to present my game which I play against Dinara Wagner on 9 round in German Masters. So let's start. I played with the black pieces, Dinara played against me King Indian defense, and then we've got position after d5, that's some variation for the white when they close the center, and after e5 it's still theory. And I think, of course, a plan g4 and h4, such plan play white when they would like to get some attack after h5, of course, open lines, maybe some idea just to push h5, try somehow to open h line for the rook, maybe bishop h6 and so on. That's why black have to play very dynamic here, and of course next move should be like e5 with idea try to change pawns like this, or in some case close the position after e4. So Dinara continue h5, of course e4, bishop take on c5, and I think it's still the theory. If you open Chessbase, you can see it seems like some games still possible to find for this line. And after f3 I decided try something like king f7. My plan is just play rook h8 and try to get h line for the black pieces. That's why next moves for the white was knight b3. So, and in this position I think I make some mistake, like strategical mistake. I just take on b3, and I think the best move here was just to play b6 and try after knight c5 just take with the b pawn, and then open line for the b rook, also possible bishop d7, maybe regrouping black pieces, for example rook b6, queen to b8, and of course another rook can go on h8. So that's maybe possible position, it's like about equal. But after my move knight b3 I've got a plan, and after bishop d7 my plan was just keeping my queen on a7 and try to use these black squares at the end. And of course I think if I have for example more time in this position and I can play queen b8 and then queen a7, of course this position much better can be for black, because some idea queen e3 possible, some idea with a b5 future, maybe rook on h8 I can get h line and so on. So of course it was my dream, but in the game Dinara play a very nice move after c5. I understood actually I have no time just take this pawn, of course, because comes d6, and now we see that's completely nice and strong queen on the light squares, and bishop can get also c4 square, knight on d5 and so on. And the question how to play now, because in some position this bishop on e2 will be changed on my bishop on d7, and then we have a typical position when the knight much better than the bishop g7. So that's why after c5 I understood that I have to struggle maybe for draw now, because I have no time something to do like b6 or a4. So my move was queen a7. Of course Dinara played next move bishop b5. Of course she continues this plan, change my bishop, and of course she got this typical position, knight against bad bishop. And now it's really hard something to do, because for example rook h8 there is no time for such move, because of course queen goes on d7. That's why I have to play like rook d8, stop this queen of d7. And then after knight a4, of course the position for black completely like awful, but after queen a6 at least I can trade these queens and see what to do next, because white have to take this queen, otherwise the queen have no decent square, and if queen for example back, there is no there is possible b5 take on c5. That's why white try take on a6, and after rook a6 king b1, of course still position for white much better. I understood this during the game, and of course the knight always will be like better, bishop have no diagonals, it seems like completely like losing strategically for black, but still of course black have tried the chances to continue. c6. So what's the idea with this c6? I just trade some maybe central pawns here and try at least activate my rooks. So in the game was take on c6, of course rook d5. So next move is very logical for white. White takes the d line, pressure on the d6. Of course I cannot take on c5 here because rook on d8 very weak. And after bishop e7, a3. So also I think this is move like keeping idea with before. But after king e6, maybe a position for black not so bad now, because king protect e6, bishop as well protect, and some plans maybe rook can regrouping from h8 to h2. Yeah, in future also some possible plan. But of course white take on d6 and now continue with knight c3, keeping pressure on a5 and also still d line very strong for white. So now rook a6, also I have to protect a5 square, and after king c2, that's a time when the black have something to do, because if just staying like, I don't know, bishop f8 or some another move, it seems like the white completely dominate and king just keeping go somehow in the central, and that's how the position of this rook's not so good. That's the time, yes, of course, the black have to activate the rook as soon as possible, and maybe, yes, some chance activate from h8 to h3 and try to get some activity of these squares, of this pawn on f3. So, let's see how it was in the game. Rook b5, I have to take on d1, of course, rook h8, I can give this pawn on h5, but still I keep in my eye on the plan, just make some active play on the f3. So rook b6, king f7 in the game, rook of course take on b7. Of course I cannot just play rook h3 because knight d5. I have to repeat the position, king e6, and we see that it was in the game 36, 37 moves, and then how it was, check again, back again rook, again check, again back king, and after king f7 I just have some thoughts that maybe it's a repetition. That's why it was like 3 times move rook on b6 and b7, and 3 times my king as well makes such a moves. That's why I just have the thought on my head. I just stop clock, call referee and said, okay, maybe it's a draw, can you please look if so my thought is right or not. And it keeps on about 5 minutes when referee look in position in online database, online our game, and he said no, it's not 3-time repetition, because at the beginning position, first position was with the pawn on b7. So it means that this is not the same position like in repetition, yeah? That's with the pawn b7, and without the pawn that's a different position. So that's why after such repetition we just continue to play, and that was knight d5, 39 move, and after bishop c5, that was a 40 move in position. That's why white have to play very quickly next move, and I think because white have no time to think thoroughly through this position, white make some mistake, play rook c6. So, but what was the best move for the white? The best move just keep in check on b7, and after king e6 just to try directly play before, directly play for this pawn, free pawn on b line, and after take, for example, check rook h1, it's actually no time to make some active play to f3 pawn, because this pawn just quickly goes to b8. Yeah, I have to move my bishop, and then maybe b5 possible, and then b6, and we see that it's actually bring a lot of time to win this pawn and something to do for the black pieces. So that's, I think, was a chance for white to win this game. But for my luck, white played rook c6, and of course I immediately put very active my bishop on d4, and now we see it's a bit different, because after b4, for example, now I can continue with a check, and of course I have enough time to, for example, trade firstly on a b4 square and then play rook h3. We see that can be enough time just to keep win this pawn and play rook b3 to stop entire b pawn, and of course if pawn very strong, and maybe it will be not so easy, of course, win this position. It's very dangerous for both sides, because for black, yeah, already this is pawn very dangerous can be as well. So, and after bishop d4, the white play rook c7, and directly after this move, Dinara offered me a draw. I took this draw, and it's a bit like, so I can say it's a bit funny situation, because one move before I beat a draw, and Dinara not accept my draw, but move after, Dinara themselves just ask me for draw. And I can say that after keeping this draw, I've got third place on German Masters. I was just happy for this result, because I start not with a big luck. I can say it was like 1.5 points out of 4. And then in fourth, fifth rounds, I've got like in a play, and the end of this tournament was just lucky for me. And I'm very proud that I've took third place of this German Masters. So I hope you like my recap of German Masters, and let us see us, and don't forget, of course, success through chess. See us.